This is Rainy Night Horrors. Outside, the storm brews, and with it comes something darker. Every drop masks a sound, every shadow holds a shape. You're not imagining it. You're hearing the truth. Listen closely. It's already here. The glint wasn't moonlight on steel. It was the blunt geometry of a pistol nestled against the man's spine, visible just beneath the drape of his jacket. That instant, the ordinary passage across the churning water fractured. This ferry crossing, I understood, with sudden, chilling clarity, would be anything but mundane. What remained veiled was the night's grim trajectory, a path demanding I fight not merely for my own breath, but for every soul adrift with me on that vessel. Water travel has always held a certain allure for me, a quiet surrender to the sway and drift, watching the land dissolve into misty outlines while the destination slowly coalesces from the horizon offers a unique tranquility. Thus, facing a necessary business engagement, I embraced the overnight ferry over the sterile efficiency of flight. Economy played its part, certainly, but the promise of slumber, cradled by the waves, sealed the decision. An ill temper brewed in the sky as we embarked. Clouds, bruised and swollen, massed overhead, while the wind's invisible hand roughened the water into frothing peaks. Captain Mallory, however, offered reassurances with a practiced grin, dismissing the atmospheric turmoil as a touch of autumn's bluster. My cabin, compact yet sufficient, offered a narrow berth and a small, salt-kissed porthole. The familiar thrum of the engines, the vessel pulling free from its moorings. These sensations sparked the customary thrill of departure. After stowing my minimal luggage, a desire to witness our withdrawal from the harbor drew me towards the observation deck. It was there my gaze first snagged on him, a figure in perhaps his fourth decade, hair shorn close to the scalp, his features seemingly hardened into a permanent glower. He leaned near the railing, his attention raking across the scattering of passengers with an unsettling intensity. Yet it was the distinct protuberance beneath his coat that arrested my focus. The outline was stark, irrefutable, a handgun. My pulse leapt. A mistake, surely. Who brings such an object onto a ferry? I wrestled with denial, attempting to reshape the image into an innocuous phone, a bulky wallet, but a deeper instinct resonated with certainty. My scrutiny must have been palpable, for his head snapped around, his gaze colliding with mine. A silent, charged moment stretched between us. Then a smile touched his lips, a glacial curve devoid of warmth, before he pivoted away. I retreated to the sanctuary of my cabin, thoughts tumbling in frantic disarray. Report it, but the potential for error, for inciting baseless alarm, stayed my hand. Better, I reasoned, to remain vigilant, to act only upon further, undeniable provocation. Night descended, and with it, the storm's full fury. The ferry groaned, a metallic beast wrestling with waves that grew mountainous. Most passengers sought refuge below, clustering in cabins or the main lounge, escaping the wind's howl and the stinging lash of rain against the decks. Sleep, however, eluded me. Drawn by restlessness, I ascended to the lounge. It hummed with subdued activity, half filled with individuals lost in books, murmuring conversations, or fitful dozes in the upholstered chairs. Procuring coffee from the small counter, I settled near a window, mesmerized by the violent choreography of the sea outside. And then I saw them. Kalen, the man from the deck, the one with the gun, now flanked by two companions, Reese and Boren. They occupied a shadowed corner, heads bent together, their exchange low and urgent. As my gaze lingered, I witnessed a subtle transfer, something small, plastic. It bore the unmistakable look of a crew access keycard. A tremor, cold and sharp, traced my spine. This convergence was no mere chance. Their purpose, whatever it entailed, radiated menace. I grappled with my next move when a disturbance near the lounge entrance fractured the relative calm. A woman, her voice escalating towards hysteria, confronted a uniformed crew member. "You fail to grasp the danger," she cried. "He intends to murder us all." The attendant attempted soothing words, but she was adrift in terror. "A bomb!" she shrieked, the word ripping through the room. "We're doomed!" Pandemonium erupted. Bodies surged towards the exits in a panicked tide. Seizing the moment's chaos, Kalen, Reese, and Boren melted through a side door. One I instinctively knew led to the vessel's restricted arteries. A precipice of decision yawned before me. Join the frantic exodus. Attempt to articulate my fragmented observations to a preoccupied crew member. A gut feeling screamed that delay would prove fatal. Drawing a ragged breath, I slipped through the same doorway the trio had breached. The corridor beyond was narrow, steeped in dim utilitarian light. Footsteps echoed faintly ahead. I followed, striving for silence. My own heartbeat a frantic drum against my ribs, loud enough, I feared, to betray me. The path twisted, a labyrinth descending into the ferry's mechanical heart. They halted before a heavy door stenciled engine room. Kalen swiped the captured key card. The lock clicked. They vanished within. Edging closer, I pressed my ear against the cool metal. Their voices, muffled by the intervening steel and the thrum of machinery, reached me in disjointed fragments, yet coalesced into a horrifying whole. Timer engaged? Affirmative. 30 minutes remaining. Excellent. Position will be optimal then. Mid-channel. Maximum consequence. My blood ran cold. The distraught woman, Clara, hadn't been delusional. A bomb. A calculated atrocity designed to send this vessel and its hundreds of passengers plunging into the tempestuous depths. Action was imperative. But what action? I was Elias Vance, a man of spreadsheets and presentations, not espionage and combat. No weapon, no relevant skills, only the fragile shield of surprise and the stark knowledge that inaction equaled mass murder. Steeling myself, I shoved the heavy door inward and stepped across the threshold. The engine room assaulted the senses, a vast, echoing cavern dominated by colossal machinery, the air thick with heat, the tang of oil, and a deafening roar. It took a vital second to locate them across the vibrating deck plates. They clustered around an object on the far side. Moving cautiously, using the bulk of generator as cover, I crept nearer, close enough now to discern their focus. A bulky contraption, a nest of wires and blinking indicators. The device. Reese straightened, wiping grease-stained hands on his trousers. Armed and ticking. Let's vacate. Now, or never. My eyes darted around, desperate for an improvised weapon. They snagged on a hefty wrench suspended from a toolboard. I seized it, its solid weight a small comfort. As the men turned towards the exit, I emerged from my concealment. "Hold it right there!" My voice, amplified by adrenaline, aimed for authority it didn't possess. They spun, surprise contorting into rage. Kalen's hand instinctively dropped towards his waistband. I gave him no time. Summoning every ounce of strength, I flung the wrench. It struck him squarely in the sternum, staggering him backward with a grunt. His pistol skipped across the grimy floor plates. Reese and Boren charged. I sidestepped the first lunge, but Boren connected with a brutal blow to my jaw. The coppery taste of blood filled my mouth as I reeled. What followed was a raw, desperate struggle, outnumbered, outmatched, yet fueled by the primal need to survive, and to ensure others did too. Somehow, I parried, landed clumsy blows, used the cluttered environment to impede them, but exhaustion clawed at me. Boren trapped me in a crushing headlock. Reese hammered my ribs with punishing fists. Vision blurring at the edges, a new sound pierced the cacophony, the strident, insistent shriek of ship-wide alarms. My assailants froze, momentarily disoriented. Boren cursed under his breath. Someone, Clara perhaps, had successfully raised the alarm. Their fractional hesitation was my only chance. Wrenching free, I scrambled towards the fallen handgun. My fingers closed around the checkered grip just as Kalen, recovering, lunged. We crashed to the floor, grappling fiercely for control of the weapon. Dimly, through the roaring in my ears, I registered shouts from the corridor, the thud of approaching footsteps. A final, convulsive surge of adrenaline gave me leverage. I tore the pistol free. Instinct overriding thought, I squeezed the trigger. The report was explosive in the confined space. Kalen collapsed backward, clutching a bleeding shoulder. Reese and Boren threw up their hands, the fight draining from them as the reality of their capture dawned. Seconds later, the engine room swarmed with uniformed crew and security personnel. Their expressions registered shock as they absorbed the tableau. The subdued trio, the malevolent device still pulsing in the corner, and me, bloodied, trembling, the gun still smoking slightly in my grasp. The subsequent hours dissolved into a disorienting montage. Bomb disposal experts rendered the device inert. The ferry, under escort, diverted to the nearest coastal town. There were official statements, medical checks, the dispassionate recounting of terror. I learned then that Clara, the panicked woman in the lounge, had indeed overheard enough to sense the danger. Her frantic, albeit unclear warnings, ultimately triggering the ship's alert. As dawn painted the sky in bruised pastels, I stood on the deck, watching the coastline solidify. The storm had broken, leaving the air washed clean, the the heavens bright. Fellow passengers approached intermittently, their words of gratitude, handshakes, and pats on the back, feeling strangely distant, buffered by the night's residual shock. A Coast Guard officer materialized beside me, holding a satellite phone. "Mr. Vance, a call for you. It's the governor's office. He wishes to offer his personal thanks." I nodded, accepting the offered device, but as I lifted it towards my ear, my gaze drifted to the infinite line where sea met sky. In that quiet moment, a profound internal shift resonated. I had stared into the abyss and not blinked. I had acted, saved lives. This ferry passage, intended as mere transit, had become a crucible. It had unearthed a vein of courage I never suspected lay within, a potent reminder of the extraordinary resilience dormant in ordinary existence. Beginning my conversation with the governor, I knew with unshakable certainty that future adversities would be met with a different man, one tempered by necessity, aware now of the unexpected strengths that can surface when the unthinkable occurs. For sometimes, the most improbable saviors are forged only when danger leaves no other choice. The archaic instant print device possessed a surprising gravity in my grasp, its textured shell cool against my palm. Unearthed from a shadowed recess in my grandmother's loft, it felt like an artifact from a half-forgotten dream. Possessed by an odd impulse, I'd brought it along on my solitary trek, deep into the brooding rainforests of the Cascadia wilderness. How could I have known this obsolete mechanism, this plastic and glass curiosity, would refract my vision, showing me a reality folded within our own? That morning commenced as any pilgrimage into the woods might. Dawn's breath, thick with mist, still caressed the colossal cedars as I navigated the serpentine path. The forest thrummed, a symphony of unseen birdsong and rustling undergrowth. The air saturated with the resinous perfume of pine mingled with damp loam. Ideal conditions for capturing moments, I thought, and soon I was framing compositions. The intricate fretwork of a moss-laden stump, a cluster of startlingly scarlet fungi, a lone shaft of sunlight piercing the dense canopy like a celestial spear. Only upon reaching a secluded glade did the fabric of the ordinary begin to fray. Raising the camera to immortalize the tranquil tableau, my eye caught an anomaly through the square viewfinder. An entity, impossibly slender and elongated, occupied the glade's distant edge. It remained utterly still, its silhouette seeming to bleed into the surrounding arboreal shadows. I blinked, lowering the device. The clearing stretched before me, vacant, precisely as it had been seconds prior, a ripple of confusion. I lifted the camera once more. It materialized again, the shape, starkly defined within the viewfinder's frame, yet utterly absent to my unaided sight. A frantic percussion started against my ribs. What phantom was this? A glitch in the age camera's mechanics? Some spectral double exposure? Or was I peering through a fissure, glimpsing something that dwelled just past the thinnest membrane of our perceived world? My fingers, betraying a sudden tremor, depressed the shutter. The camera emitted a low whir, followed by a decisive click, expelling a pale square. I fanned it through the cool air, anticipation warring with apprehension as I watched the latent image bloom. Slowly, painstakingly, the chemistry rendered the scene, the clearing, faithful to my memory, yet marred by one terrifying inclusion. There the figure solidified, its attenuated limbs and vacant countenance provoking an involuntary shudder that traced its way up my spine. My gaze snapped up from the photograph, sweeping the clearing again. Emptiness, only trees, ferns, the familiar tapestry of the forest floor. No hint of the preternatural being now captured on the glossy square clutched in my hand. Curiosity, sharp and insistent, eclipsed my nascent fear. I raised the camera anew, executing a slow, deliberate pan across the sylvan landscape. Through the lens, they emerged. More figures, specters lurking behind ancient trunks, others standing brazenly in dappled sunlight, yet invisible otherwise. They populated the entire vista, a clandestine stratum teeming with existence concealed from human senses. The ensuing hour became a feverish documentation. Each ejected photograph unveiled further fragments of this adjacent dimension, organisms defying biological possibility, architectures woven into the non-spaces between branches, even suggestions of portals hinting at geographies beyond comprehension. As the sun bled towards the western ridges, painting the sky in bruised tones, I grasped the extent of my disorientation. I had strayed far, deep into woods that felt older, wilder than where my journey began. The familiar trail was lost. Panic, cold and sharp, began its insidious creep. It was then I perceived it, a low, resonant humming, strangely melodic, emanating from nearby. The sound was exquisite, hypnotic, unlike any terrestrial music. Compelled by an instinct that bypassed reason, I moved towards its source, pushing through a dense curtain of bracken into yet another clearing. At its heart stood a configuration of weathered stone stelae, their surfaces alive with intricate, swirling glyphs that seemed to undulate at the periphery of my vision. And there, within the circle's embrace, resided the origin of the captivating hum. It was one of the entities I'd been photographing, yet distinct, larger, its form possessing a greater solidity, a more defined presence. As I watched, transfixed, it pivoted towards me. I felt its attention, and awareness directed my way, though it possessed no discernible eyes. Reflexively, the camera came up, my finger poised above the shutter. The being inclined its head, a gesture unsettlingly reminiscent of human curiosity. Then, stunningly, it communicated. "You perceive us," the thought echoed within my skull, bypassing my ears entirely. "You have breached the partition." My own voice, when I found it, was barely a gasp. "What? What are you?" The entity's outline shimmered like heat haze rising from summer asphalt. "We are the interstitials," the mental voice imparted, "dwelling neither wholly here nor there, but within the seams connecting your reality to others." My thoughts churned, struggling to grasp the implications. Why now? Why only through this? "The apparatus you carry," it indicated the camera with a subtle shift of its form. It originates from a time when the thresholds between worlds were more permeable. It grants you a fleeting aperture into our domain. I glance down at the instant print camera, then back towards the shimmering interstitial. Are you a threat? A sensation akin to wind rustling dry leaves filled my mind. A form of laughter, I deduced. No more than your own species, it conveyed. We have coexisted alongside humankind for millennia, unseen, unbothered. Your perception, however, it alters the equilibrium. A profound chill permeated me. Alters it how? The interstitial's form grew indistinct, its edges blurring. The partition is pierced, it communicated, the thought voice fading. The boundaries thin. What has remained veiled may soon spill into the awareness of all. Wait, I implored, but the plea was swallowed by silence. The entity dissolved. The stone circle vanished with it. I stood alone in an unremarkable clearing, the profound encounter leaving no physical trace, save for the stack of developed photographs in my trembling hand, each a potent testament to a world hidden in plain sight. Guided by some newly awakened internal compass, I eventually rediscovered the path. Yet, I knew my existence had been fundamentally remapped. The days and weeks that followed were consumed by obsessive study of the photographs, scrutinizing every alien detail. I delved into obscure folklore, ancient myths, unearthing faint resonances of the interstitials in forgotten tales across disparate cultures. Attempts to relocate the clearing of the monoliths proved futile. It remained elusive, perhaps existing outside conventional space. The archaic camera now rests upon my desk, a tangible anchor to the impossible truth unveiled that day. Occasionally, in the deep quiet of night, I lift it, peering through its lens into the familiar shadows of my room, and sometimes, fleetingly, a flicker of movement registers just beyond the frame's edge. What the future holds, what the slow erosion of the veil portends, remains shrouded. But this much is certain: the reality we inhabit is infinitely stranger, more layered, more astonishing than we dare to conceive. And somewhere, nestled within the unperceived gaps, the interstitials observe, perhaps waiting for the moment their hiddenness becomes obsolete. As for myself, I've become an unwitting custodian, a sentinel guarding knowledge that could fracture the consensus world. Whether I will ever divulge this discovery remains uncertain. Perhaps humanity isn't prepared, or perhaps, as the threshold continues to fray, awareness will dawn regardless of readiness. Until then, I watch, camera near, poised to capture any further glimpses through the thinning partition. Because once you've truly seen beyond the veil, retreat is impossible. The world feels amplified, richer, and undeniably, potentially more perilous than I ever imagined. But I embrace it. After all, how many can claim to have photographed the unseen? The premonition should have struck, cold and sharp, the instant my gaze fell upon the handprint branding my apartment door. 3 a.m. The graveyard shift at the distribution center had bled away in its usual fashion, a monotonous ballet of shifting cartons, verifying manifests, the familiar soul-leeching routine. But this print, inhumanly vast, it dwarfed any hand wrought by nature, and it wasn't merely surface, grime, or paint. It looked embossed into the very steel, a concave violation. Fatigue hammered behind my eyes. Oblivion beckoned. Some late-night vandalism, I muttered, the words thin against the pre-dawn chill, forcing the key into the lock. Inside, the apartment lay still and sepulchral, precisely as I'd abandoned it 12 hours prior. My keys clattered onto the Formica counter. Steel-toed boots thudded onto the floor. The shower's heat was a balm, sluicing away the grime and weariness. Wrapped in a towel, clad only in a clean shirt and boxers, I surrendered to the mattress. Sleep claimed me instantly. A heavy, dreamless plunge. Crack! My eyes flew open. A percussive shock from the kitchen, resonant as a slammed cupboard door. The bedside clock glowed. 4:47 a.m. I remained utterly motionless, ears straining against the silence that descended, thick and absolute, for perhaps half a minute. Then the unmistakable scrape and slide of drawers being rifled through. Slowly, deliberately, one yielding to the next. A knot of sandpaper formed in my throat. I lived utterly alone. No one possessed a key. My hand groped instinctively for my phone on the nightstand, finding only void. Then remembrance, plugged into the kitchen charger. Another drawer rasped open, the clink and rattle of silverware, sharp in the stillness. My heart became a frantic drum against my ribs as I slid from the bed. A floorboard groaned beneath my weight. Abruptly, the kitchen noises ceased. Silence, complete and suffocating, reclaimed the apartment. The baseball bat resided in the closet. Moving with the stealth of prey, I retrieved it, my grip tightening until knuckles shone white. The bedroom door stood ajar, offering a sliver of the darkened hallway that led toward the kitchen. Stillness reigned. Then, footfalls. Ponderous, yet not the tread of boots or shoes. More akin to bare feet. Wet bare feet, slapping against the linoleum. I hefted the bat, inching toward the door. The steps drew nearer, traversing the hallway towards my room, but their rhythm was a discordant offense. Not the steady left-right cadence of human locomotion. It was syncopated, arrhythmic, as if the impacts were strangely spaced. A shadow flowed across the visible slice of hallway. My chest constricted. The silhouette was aberrantly scaled, impossibly tall, disturbingly broad, and its movement, it was intrinsically wrong. The footfalls halted directly outside my door. Now, breathing was audible, a gurgling inhalation, wet and labored, as if drawn through a throat choked with fluid. Slowly, inexorably, the door began to swing inward. I raised the bat higher, muscles coiled to strike. But the sight that filled the doorway dissolved the strength in my arms. It towered, its crown grazing the ceiling frame. Skin, the color of ash, stretched taut over a skeletal frame, yet its dimensions were an anatomical heresy. Arms dangled past its knees, terminating in hands larger than platters, hands that mirrored the brand upon my door. Its legs possessed avian joints, bending backward unnaturally, and the face, devoid of features save for a jagged fissure that bisected its skull from ear to ear, crammed with row upon row of acicular fangs. Viscous obsidian fluid, too dense for water, dripped from its chin, spattering onto the carpet. Immobilized, breathless, the thing's maw gaped wider, impossibly wider, the drowned respiration intensifying. Then the stench struck, a miasma of decay and fetid pools. It lurched forward into the room, its reversed articulation lending its gait a jerky, puppet-like quality. Those monstrous hands swung loosely, fingers twitching. Primal instinct surged. I swung the bat with every ounce of force. It connected against the thing's ribs with a dull resonance, yet bounced off as if striking solid concrete. The impact shuddered up my arms, jarring the bat from my grasp. The creature registered nothing. Instead, one enormous hand swept towards me. I ducked beneath the limb and fled. My shoulder struck the door jamb, a flare of pain instantly swallowed by adrenaline. Down the hallway I sprinted, towards the sanctuary of the front door. Behind me, the pursuit began, those wet, slapping footfalls accelerating, closing the distance. I reached the door, seized the handle. It refused to turn. The door stood fast. A frantic glance confirmed the deadbolt was retracted, the chain disengaged, yet it remained sealed, as if welded shut. The footfalls ceased. Hot, putrid breath washed over the back of my neck. Slowly, I turned. It dominated the hallway now, floor to ceiling, somehow magnified. That grotesque fissure stretched into a horrifying smile, revealing ranks of teeth receding into its gullet. A colossal hand reached. I threw myself sideways, rolling across the living room floor, my shoulder colliding with the coffee table, scattering magazines. The creature followed, its head scraping the ceiling, smearing viscous trails on the white paint. Scrambling upright, I bolted for the kitchen. My phone lay on the counter, still tethered to its charger. I snatched it, fingers fumbling, trying to wake the screen, dial for help. Blackness, utterly dead. Impossible. It had charged for hours. A shadow enveloped me. Turning, I saw the creature crammed into the kitchen doorway, its form contorted to fit the space. Both hands reached now, fingers splaying wide enough to encircle my chest. I grabbed the nearest object, a knife from the dish rack, its blade still beaded with water. I slashed wildly at the closest hand. The blade bit deep into the ashen flesh. Not blood, but black ichor poured forth, splashing onto the linoleum, where it hissed and steamed upon contact. The creature emitted a sound then, a high-pitched ululation that vibrated in my teeth and made my ears ache. The wounded hand retracted, but the other lashed out with blinding speed. Digits like unyielding conduits clamped around my chest, expelling the air from my lungs. Effortlessly, it lifted me clear off the floor, drawing me inexorably towards that horrifying visage. The maw distended further, jaw unhinging like a serpent's. The reek of death intensified, wave upon wave. Rows upon rows of teeth gleamed dully in the ambient light, filtering through the window. In raw panic, I plunged the knife into its wrist. More black fluid erupted, cascading down my arm. Where it touched my skin, it burned with vitriolic agony. A scream tore from my throat. For a fleeting instant, the creature's grip faltered. I twisted violently, crashing onto the kitchen floor. The black ichor was spreading, eating corrosive pits into the linoleum. Steam, thick with the stench of rot, filled the air, I scrambled towards the bathroom, the last room with a door to offer even momentary defense. Behind me, the creature's skirling cry escalated, rattling the window panes. I slammed the bathroom door, fumbled the lock, knowing it was futile. The small window offered a desperate, slim chance. I clambered onto the toilet, reaching for the latch. The door imploded inward, showering me with fractured wood. A hand, larger than my own head, thrust through the ruined opening. I lost my footing, tumbling backward, my head cracking against the porcelain sink. The world swam, lying dazed on the tile floor, blood trickling into my eye. I looked up as the creature squeezed its immense frame through the doorway. Its mouth yawned open once more, but this time, something else emerged from the depths of its throat, a long black tongue, coiling and writhing like an independent entity. It touched my leg. Instantaneous, chemical fire seared through me. I tried to scream again, but only silence emerged. Darkness encroached upon my vision. The final image burned into my retinas was that colossal mouth descending, those infinite rows of teeth promising oblivion. Then, nothing. I woke in my own bed. Sunlight streamed through the window. For a disorienting moment, the relief of nightmare's end washed over me. Then I saw them, the pockmarks eaten into the carpet by the corrosive ichor, the fractured testament of my bathroom door, the handprint still deeply indented in the steel of my front door, now starkly visible from the inside. That was 3 days past. Sleep has become an impossibility. Each night, precisely at 4:47 a.m., the wet footfalls resume in my kitchen. Each night, they draw fractionally closer to my bedroom. I've sought refuge in sterile hotel rooms, the cramped confines of my car, even driving aimlessly through the desolate hours. It makes no difference. Wherever I am, when the appointed time arrives, the slapping steps find me. Last night, another handprint appeared, pressed deep into the hood of my car. Tonight marks the 4th night. A chilling certainty tells me there will not be a 5th. The sun bleeds below the horizon now. In a few short hours, 4:47 a.m. will arrive again. Somewhere within the apartment, I can already discern the sound of dripping water. It seems to be growing louder. A premonition, a tremor beneath the surface of reality, should have registered the instant my foot crossed the threshold of that house. But need gnaws away discernment, doesn't it? It smooths the jagged edges of intuition until all you see is the solution, not the snare. Weeks adrift in the digital sea of temporary shelters, scavenging for a mooring. That's how the advert for the Corbin residence snagged me. A sprawling sanctuary in the manicured wilds of suburbia, generous compensation, a mere weekend's commitment, an illusion of providence too perfect to question. So I lunged, application dispatched before doubt could crystallize. The Corbins presented a veneer of affability, stretched thin over some inner preoccupation. Mrs. Corbin, statuesque, her hair sculpted into an immovable blonde helmet, conducted a breathless survey of the premises, while her husband, Mr. Corbin, a figure etched in charcoal lines and costly tailoring, lingered like a silent, watchful sentinel. "Leo's tucked in," Mrs. Corbin chirped, the name of their 5-year-old son lilting oddly. "He's a sound sleeper, but his room's the 3rd door on the left. should the improbable occur. My nod was automatic. I'd minded the boy once before, a lifetime ago it seemed. Yet, a discordant note vibrated in her voice, a tremor beneath the taut, unlined landscape of her face. Nerves, or something else smoothed over by cosmetic artifice. "A final detail," Mr. Corbin interjected, his voice a low rumble, guiding me towards a gleaming obsidian tablet fused to the living room wall. "Enhanced security protocols. Full visual access." He gestured, and the screen fractured into a mosaic of silent, watchful eyes surveying their domain. Cameras. The memory held no such surveillance. Mrs. Corbin emitted a sound like shattering glass shaped into laughter. "One simply must be vigilant, mustn't one? Do keep a diligent watch, Alara. It settles our minds, knowing you're attentive." And then, propelled by expensive fragrance and a final volley of clipped instructions, they dissolved into the night, leaving me adrift in their wake. Stillness descended, thick and absolute, punctuated only by the subliminal thrum of the house's electronic nervous system. In the kitchen's sterile gleam, seeking solace in a cold drink, my gaze snagged on the wall-mounted tablet, a grid of shadowed spaces, the ink-black lawn, the vacant driveway, the dormant upper corridor. As I drank, my phone pulsed against my palm, an unlisted number. "Making yourself comfortable, I perceive." Aichi traced a path down my spine. Impossible. My eyes darted to the camera feeds, a sudden, suffocating awareness of being perceived. Fingers numb, I tapped back. "Identify yourself." The reply was instantaneous. "Consider me an observer, a fellow sentinel." My pulse hammered against my ribs. A prank? Some bizarre test orchestrated by the Corbins? Another vibration. "That shade of blue suits you." My breath hitched. The sweater I wore was, indeed, blue. This unseen entity wasn't guessing. They were watching. "Where are you?" My thumbs trembled. "How?" "There are perspectives unseen." The cryptic answer arrived. "But fear not. My purpose isn't harm. It's caution." Alarms shrieked silently in my skull. Flee. Contact authorities. Reach the Corbins. Vanish from this place. Yet, a morbid fascination, laced with undeniable terror, anchored me. Caution regarding what? A pregnant pause stretched the digital silence before the next message materialized. "The Corbins wear masks. This residence harbors darkness. Remain vigilant." A visceral coldness permeated me. As I framed a demand for clarity, a distinct sound fractured the quiet from above. A muted impact, heavy, deliberate. My breath snagged. Leo was meant to be dreaming. The house solely mine, wasn't it? Drawn by an invisible thread, I moved towards the staircase, heart thundering a frantic rhythm. Passing the living room, the tablet's glow arrested me. On the screen segment dedicated to Leo's room, an empty bed, linens disturbed. Panic flared. Where was the child? My phone buzzed anew. Investigate the attic. The attic. No recollection surfaced from Mrs. Corbin's whirlwind tour, but ascending the main staircase, my eyes caught it, an unobtrusive, narrow door tucked away at the hallway's terminus, previously unnoticed. Primal instinct shrieked, "Danger! Escape!" Yet the image of the empty bed, the possibility of Leo lost or hurt, it held me fast. Trembling, my hand closed over the cool metal knob. It yielded, unveiling a precipitous flight of steps swallowed by shadow. "Hello?" My voice, a fragile thread in the oppressive silence. "Leo? Is that you?" Only the void answered, pressing close. Steeling myself, I ascended, the phone's beam carving a path through the dust-laden air. Each tread groaned, amplifying the stillness. Near the summit, shapes coalesced in the gloom, stacked cartons like forgotten monoliths, furniture shrouded in spectral white. And there, nestled deep in a corner, a diminutive form, swaddled in a blanket. "Leo?" Relief washed over me, potent and premature. "It's all right. What are you doing up here?" The figure remained inert. A filament of dread tightened in my gut as I drew closer. Gently, I eased back the covering. A strangled cry tore from my throat. Not Leo. A doll. Disturbingly life-sized, crafted with chilling verisimilitude. Glassy eyes stared sightlessly upward. A rictus smile painted onto its porcelain features. My phone vibrated against my palm, a jarring counterpoint to the horror. Now the truth reveals itself. Flee, if you still can. Raw panic ignited. I spun, desperate for the stairs, but the way was barred. Mr. Corbin materialized at the landing, a silhouette against the dim hall light, his expression an unreadable cipher. "Disappointing, Ilara." His voice, devoid of warmth, sliced through the air. "Such elementary directives. Monitor the feeds, nothing more." Mrs. Corbin glided into view beside him. Leo held fast in her embrace. The boy's eyes were huge, reflecting stark terror, his small gasp muffled by his mother's immaculately manicured hand. "We cannot permit indiscretions," Mrs. Corbin stated, the polite facade fracturing, revealing something glacial and sharp beneath. "A pity. You showed promise." I retreated, mind scrambling for purchase in the sudden abyss, hemmed in by dust and secrets. "Why?" The words scraped my throat. Mr. Corbin offered a smile that never touched the coldness in his eyes. "Consider it. A matter of specialized requirements, needs demanding a certain discretion. Someone whose absence wouldn't ripple the surface." The implication struck with physical force. This was no elaborate charade. This was monstrous. Realization detonated, triggering a primal surge. I launched myself forward, exploiting their momentary surprise. A shoulder connected with Mr. Corbin, sending him staggering as I plunged past, down the protesting stairs. Shouts echoed behind, heavy footfalls pounding in pursuit. A desperate flight through the opulent cage, the front door the only focal point, the sole promise of salvation. My fingers brushed the cool metal of the lock. Then, searing pain exploded in my shoulder. A sharp cry escaped me as the world tilted, vision fracturing. A swift-acting agent. The room swam, gravity betraying me. Falling. Mrs. Corbin's face swam into focus above, that serene, chilling smile fixed in place. "Pleasant slumber, Ilara," she murmured, her voice a silken threat. "The true engagement commences upon your awakening." Time lost all meaning in the drugged abyss. Consciousness returned sluggishly, settling into the confines of a cramped, airless space devoid of windows. My head throbbed. My mouth felt like parched earth. As dim light resolved into shapes, I saw them. Other figures, huddled in misery against bare walls, sprawled on meager pallets. My phone, predictably, was gone. But deep in my pocket, a familiar reassuring cylinder remained untouched. The small canister of pepper spray, a habit born of city living. Hope flickered, a tiny ember in the suffocating dark. I waited, conserving strength, hoarding resolve, until the opportunity presented itself. A brief lapse in vigilance as another captive was brought in. Then, instinct took over, a chaotic scramble, adrenaline flooding my system. The stinging spray created a window, narrow but sufficient. Blindly, I navigated upwards, bursting not from an attic, but from the subterranean depths of a cellar, into the gray promise of approaching dawn. Cool air rushed into my lungs as I ran, propelled by sheer terror, not daring to look back. Miles melted away underfoot until the fluorescent sanctuary of a roadside gas station offered refuge. The call was made. What followed was a maelstrom, flashing lights, urgent questions, the slow dismantling of the Corbins' respectable charade, their arrest, the discovery of others ensnared in their web, some lost for months. For me, the echoes remain. The easy trust in strangers, the simple faith in a helping hand, fractured, perhaps irrevocably. Every benign offer now casts a long, predatory shadow, yet survival is its own fierce vindication, a testament cemented by the liberation of others. It's a fragile solace, but one I cling to while navigating the wreckage. Though should my phone ever again flare to life with a message from the unknown, I won't hesitate. I will simply let it fall. The pharaonic urn, millennia entombed in stillness, had undeniably twitched. My breath hitched, a frigid certainty seizing my core as I stared, transfixed, at the security monitor's ghostly glow. There, stark against the pixelated background, the artifact lurched infinitesimally between recorded moments. No tremor, no human hand, just an impossible, silent slide. That single, aberrant motion was the fissure through which the night's sanity would drain, pulling me into a vortex where the solid barrier between ancient dust and prison dread dissolved into terrifying mist. For half a year, the echoing corridors of the Civic Museum had been my nocturnal domain. Elias Thorne, doctoral candidate by day, guardian of relics by night. The arrangement suited my need for quiet study amid the silent sentinels of history. Anthropology texts were my usual companions. The greatest challenge, typically the battle against encroaching sleep, under the low hum of the climate control. Tonight, however, slumber was a distant shore. The shift began unremarkably. 10 o'clock saw me relieving the daytime custodian, the heavy doors sighing shut behind me, sealing me within the sepulchral hush. My initial patrol traced familiar paths through galleries where exhibits slumbered, their forms distorted into strange beasts by the sparse emergency lighting. The inherent creepiness of the place, I'd long since rationalized, was merely a product of silence and shadow. Or so my confidence insisted. Midnight approached, hunched over the console, eyes scanning the bank of screens. A flicker snagged my attention. The feed from the Nile Antiquities Hall, specifically the camera fixed upon its crown jewel, a 4,000-year-old vessel of ceremony, displayed the anomaly, an inch, perhaps less, but undeniably westward from its established position. I blinked, rubbed tired eyes, commanded the system to rewind. The digital ghost repeated its performance. Frame A, the urn centered. Frame B, subtly yet irrefutably displaced. Impossible, the word escaped my lips, a dry whisper swallowed by the control room's quiet. Every facet of that display was etched into my memory. The urn possessed significant heft, cradled securely within its climate-controlled, reinforced vitrine. Spontaneous relocation wasn't in its repertoire. A system error, a momentary distortion in the feed, logic scrabbled for purchase. An inspection was necessary, if only to quell the rising tide of the irrational. Yet, as my footsteps echoed towards the Egyptian wing, a palpable change occurred in the atmosphere. The air grew dense, charged with a static pressure that prickled the skin, reminiscent of the heavy stillness preceding a violent storm. At first glance through the archway, the gallery appeared undisturbed. The urn rested upon its plinth, its painted figures and hieroglyphic script absorbing the ambient gloom. But drawing nearer, my heart hammered against my ribs. It had moved. The intricately painted Wadjet eye, the protective eye of Horus that perpetually surveyed the gallery's heart, was now canted distinctly askew, its gaze averted. A tremor, cold and sharp, traced the length of my spine. My earlier certainty, the assured dismissal of the impossible, evaporated like morning mist. The first intimation of wrongness arrived unannounced on an unremarkable Tuesday evening. I was merely passing the guest room's closed door when a peculiar magnetism arrested my steps. No sound had snagged my attention. It was purely an internal insistence, a strange gravity drawing my gaze to the inert wood, compelling me to turn the knob. Inside, the flip of the switch banished shadows, revealing the expected scene. A bed dormant under its coverlet, a modest pine dresser, the heavy drape of umber curtains swallowing the window. Yet the air itself felt taut, strung with an unseen tension. I lingered, adrift in the stillness, anticipating something. My intuition screamed silently, but the room offered no confession. With a sigh that felt inadequate, I extinguished the light, pulled the door shut, and presumed the moment concluded. Scarcely days later, necessity propelled me back across that threshold, seeking a disused valise nested within the dresser. That's when the curtains captured my notice. They were undulating, a subtle, languid drift, despite the sealed window and the absolute stillness of the room's air. No draft, no vent, no conceivable cause. I watched, mesmerized by their slow, hypnotic sway. Then, for a fleeting second, the deep folds coalesced, twisted into something horribly suggestive of a grin, a wide, shadowed curve, a rictus etched in shadow and fabric. I blinked, rubbed my eyes fiercely. Drawing nearer, my hand reached for the thick material, poised to wrench it aside, to expose whatever lurked behind. But as the heavy folds parted under my grip, there was only the window pane, securely latched, reflecting the room's empty geometry. A frisson traced the nape of my neck. My gaze swept the quiet space, a frantic inventory. Taking a steadying breath, I lectured myself on pareidolia, the mind's penchant for finding patterns in randomness. Dismissing the vision, I retrieved the valise and retreated. That night, the ritual of brushing my teeth became a backdrop for the image's resurgence. Each blink conjured the curtain's unsettling smile. I attempted to anchor myself in the mundane, tomorrow's list of tasks, an overdue utility bill, but the phantom grin persisted, imprinted on my mind's eye. Sleep, usually a swift surrender, proved elusive. An amorphous anxiety coiled in my gut. I fought it, doused the bedside lamp, and eventually succumbed to a troubled drift. By morning's light, the conviction that I'd merely succumbed to fancy had almost taken root. The day unfolded with comforting normalcy. The commute, the office routine, dinner, the flicker of the television. Then, traversing the hallway toward bed, the same insistent nudge returned as I passed the guest room. A silent summons. Yielding, I pushed the door open, activated the light, and fixed my stare upon the curtains. They hung perfectly still, weighty and inert, as if movement were alien to their very fibers. I waited, a sentinel in the doorway, observing their profound immobility. Nothing. Shrugging off the lingering disquiet as foolishness, I killed the light and withdrew. Yet, hours later, perhaps 2 hours past midnight, something wrenched me from slumber. I surfaced abruptly, sitting bolt upright in the profound hush of the sleeping house. Listening intently, I navigated the hallway's familiar darkness, only to perceive a faint blade of light bleeding from beneath the guest room door. A light I never, ever left burning. My pulse leapt, a frantic drum against my ribs. A tremor began in my hands. Reaching for the doorknob, its metallic coldness shocked my fingertips. I pushed the door inward. The overhead fixture remained dark, yet an ethereal luminescence permeated the room, originating from beyond the window, perhaps a distant streetlight filtering through. The curtains, which I meticulously kept drawn, were now parted slightly in the center, and they were moving again, a soft, rhythmic shifting, back and forth, as if invisible hands played behind them. A tingling current coursed down my spine, my stomach clenched, heart hammering. I advanced, fingers closing around the edge of one heavy panel. With a swift tug, I swept it aside, braced to confront whoever hid there. Nothing. Only the sealed window, impervious to any breeze, offering no explanation. The sheer wrongness of it resonated through me. My arms trembled as I released the fabric, stepping back. A cool film of sweat beaded on my forehead, my breathing shallow and rapid. I backed out of the room, instinctively flicking the light switch, which inexplicably clicked off, though I was certain it had been inert moments before. I secured the door and stood in the hallway, consciously slowing the frantic rhythm of my lungs. Retreating to my own bedroom, I engaged the lock, a barrier that felt woefully inadequate. Sleep was a lost cause. Hours passed as I lay rigid, replaying the scene, battling logic against the chilling evidence of my senses. Had I forgotten the curtains? Misremembered the light? Each rationalization crumbled against the visceral certainty that something was profoundly amiss. In the ensuing days, the guest room became forbidden territory. I skirted its entrance, the very thought of witnessing that animate fabric, that spectral smile, filling me with a low-grade dread. Life proceeded on its usual tracks: work, errands, evening television. but the hallway felt charged. Each passage was underscored by a pressure in my chest. My eyes would dart involuntarily towards the door, and sometimes, just sometimes, I'd swear I heard it. A faint, papery rustle from within, like dry leaves skittering across floorboards. I tried to dismiss it. The house settling, phantom winds, but the wind was absent, and the house's familiar groans had never sounded quite like that. One evening, resolve hardening within me, I decided to confront the ambiguity head-on. Armed with a powerful flashlight, I marched into the guest room. I flooded the space with both the overhead light and the torch's focused beam, meticulously inspecting every corner, every shadow. I shifted the dresser, searching for hidden vents or drafts. None. I ran my fingers along the window seals, locked, airtight, no cracks, no breaches. Everything appeared aggressively normal, except for the curtains themselves. When my fingers brushed the umber fabric, it felt unnervingly cool, possessing an unnatural chill, as if it had recently been stored in a freezer, despite the room's ambient temperature. I rubbed the material between thumb and forefinger, testing for dampness. It wasn't wet, merely cold, profoundly, inexplicably cold. After a moment, baffled, I let the fabric fall and exited, pulling the door firmly shut, feeling more bewildered than ever. Later, deep in the night, around the unforgiving hour of 2 a.m., I woke again. The hallway outside my bedroom seemed swallowed by an unusual density of darkness. The small nightlight near the bathroom, a constant beacon, was extinguished. Bulb failure, perhaps, or something else. Clutching my phone, its screen cast in pallid spectral light, I stepped out. The beam sliced through the gloom, painting the familiar space in stark, washed-out tones. I stood frozen, gaze fixed on the guest room door. My pulse throbbed, a heavy beat echoing in my ears. Then I heard it distinctly, a soft, insidious rustling, fabric whispering against fabric. Compelled, I crept forward, pressing my ear flat against the cool wood. The sound persisted, a gentle, rhythmic friction, as if someone were slowly, deliberately drawing the curtains back and forth, back and forth. My heart hammered with such violence, I feared it might fracture my ribs. Steeling myself, I turned the knob, my hands slick with nervous sweat. Inside, the curtains gaped wide open. The window remained locked, inviolate, yet the heavy panels were flapping with a serene, steady cadence, like lungs breathing shallowly, animated by some unseen respiration. I swallowed against a throat suddenly gone desert dry. I advanced toward the window. The corners of the fabric curled upwards, unmistakably forming that eerie rictus again. It was broader now, more defined than before. The shadowed curve deeper, the implied cheek lines taut, almost sculpted. For a long moment, shock rendered me immobile. Then, galvanized by a surge of desperate energy, I lunged forward, seizing the curtain with both hands, yanking with all my might, intending to force it straight. It resisted. The fabric slithered against my grip, imbued with a silken recalcitrance, pushed by some gentle, unseen force. I fought to flatten it, but it billowed softly, brushing against my arms like a caress. Stumbling back, my eyes locked on the undulating material. I felt the fine hairs on my arms and neck prickle. My breath came in shallow gasps. Rational thought struggled for purchase. Temperature fluctuations, minute air currents. but the locked window mocked these explanations. It felt sentient, manipulated from the other side. My frantic gaze scanned the room. The bed, the dresser, the walls remained static, silent observers. Only the curtains pulsed with that uncanny, rhythmic life. Enough. I would remove them, tear them down, eliminate the source. Dragging a nearby chair beneath the curtain rod, I climbed onto its unsteady seat. My hands shook as I reached for the top edge, fumbling with the metal rings, tugging them free one by one. The hooks chimed faintly with each release. The curtain seemed to writhe, its cool fabric brushing my arms in a final act of resistance. My legs felt watery beneath me. I persisted, yanking ring after ring until the heavy panel finally surrendered, collapsing from the rod. I scrambled down, tossing the liberated curtain onto the bed like a vanquished foe. Stepping back, I surveyed the now bare window. The night outside was a canvas of deep indigo, punctuated by the distant sodium glow of a street lamp. Nothing else seemed amiss. Sweat plastered my shirt to my back. My heart raced, but a wave of profound relief washed over me. It's done, I thought. It's gone. I bundled the offending fabric into a plastic bin liner, deposited it in the hallway outside the room, and firmly closed the guest room door. The following day saw me navigating the aisles of a home furnishing store, selecting new curtains, a different hue, a contrasting texture, utterly untainted. Installing them that afternoon felt almost cathartic, tinged with a slight embarrassment at my recent terror. My imagination surely had run rampant. Perhaps the old curtains possessed some peculiar static charge, or the rod had been imperceptibly loose. Whatever the cause, I resolved, the matter was closed. That night, however, lying in bed, a familiar knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. The pervasive sense that something remained unresolved refused to dissipate. Around midnight, a sound pricked the silence. Not rustling this time, but a distinct, protesting groan, like a reluctant hinge. I rose, heart already beginning its frantic tattoo, and padded into the hallway. The guest room door stood ajar. I knew. I had closed it. I always closed it. Standing at the threshold, I peered into the impenetrable darkness within. The new curtains were drawn shut. My hand reached for the light switch, flicked it. Nothing. The bulb, perhaps, had chosen this precise moment to expire, or something else was at play. Raising my phone, I pierced the blackness with its narrow beam. The new curtains, the crisp, clean, unblemished curtains, were swaying. Gently, undeniably, they moved. No open window, no draft, no fan. Yet they shifted. A sickening lurch twisted my stomach. My breath hitched. Step by hesitant step, palms clammy, I approached the window. The new fabric drifted side to side, caught in that same, slow, deliberate rhythm. Then, horrifyingly, the center began to pucker. Folds gathered, pulling inward, coalescing. A shape emerged, smaller, nascent, but unmistakably a miniature reprise of the grin I had banished. My blood ran cold. A primal urge screamed at me to rip them down again, but my limbs felt leaden, unresponsive. I could only stand, transfixed, watching the unnatural contours deepen, the smirk widen. Then a slight bulge pressed forward from behind the center, a subtle convexity, as if something unseen were leaning into the fabric, testing its boundary. A constriction seized my throat. I felt I might choke on my own fear. Finally, instinct overrode paralysis. I lunged, grabbing the center of the curtains with both hands and yanked downwards with savage force. The curtain rod ripped from the plaster with a sharp crack, the fabric collapsing into my grasp. I stumbled backward, my heel catching the edge of the dresser, nearly sending me sprawling. The curtains fell from my hands, sprawling in a tangled heap on the floor. My phone's light jittered wildly, its beam dancing across the chaos. The broken rod clattered against the hardwood, the sound echoing hollowly in the small space. I scrambled out into the hallway, slammed the guest room door shut, and fumbled with the lock until it clicked. My entire body shuddered with reaction. There was no denying it now. Something resided in that room. Its nature remained opaque, incomprehensible, but its reality, or a reality potent enough to induce abject terror, was inescapable. The remainder of the night was spent hunched on the living room sofa, every light blazing, jumping at every creak and sigh of the house settling. When dawn finally bled through the windows, I forced myself to approach the guest room door. Silence emanated from within. Pushing it open just a crack, I let hallway light spill onto the scene. The violated curtains lay in a crumpled pile. The rod lay in two pieces. Nothing else stirred. The window remained shut. Taking a shallow breath, I stepped cautiously inside. The air felt thick, stagnant, almost suffocating. I gathered the ruined curtains, shoving them into the bin liner with their predecessors, tying the top in a tight, final knot. I haven't attempted to hang anything over that window since. The blind stayed down, perpetually lowered, but the window itself remained starkly bare. Nights are still punctuated by odd sounds filtering from behind that closed door. Sometimes, passing by, I could swear I see the slats of the blinds quiver, a brief, silent tremor, but I lacked the courage to investigate further. Better, I reasoned, to leave it undisturbed. Answers seem less important than containment. All I know is that I cannot bring myself to reclaim the room. It remains a part of the house, a locked chamber holding on to its secret. I strive to ignore it, hoping that eventually the settling sounds will cease, that the memory of the shape I witnessed will fade. Yet every time I pass that door, a heaviness settles in my gut, an intuitive certainty that the shape is still there, patient, waiting just beyond the wood and plaster. And that certainty is more than sufficient to ensure I never sleep in there, never hang curtains, never truly forget. The apartment, barely a week my own, exhaled its geriatric sighs into the deepening night. Solitude amplifies such sounds, the groan of ancient timbers, the susurrus of wind through unseen fissures, transmuting them from mere structural complaints into whispers, just for you. Perched alone on the uppermost floor of this 4-story relic, clinging to a bygone era in a neighborhood seduced by history and improbable affordability, I'd initially catalogued the creaks as the building settling into its bones. A necessary acclimation, I told myself. My haven, though threadbare, possessed a certain faded grandeur, ceilings soaring towards forgotten heights, vast windows framing the nocturnal city, hardwood floors that sang a reedy protest beneath every footfall. I'd lingered late before the television's flickering glow, seeking refuge from the day's exertions. Eventually, the screen went dark. teeth brushed, lights extinguished, I surrendered to the waiting bed around 1 in the morning, exhaustion pulling me under like a tide. The quiet deepened, wrapping itself around me. Then a disturbance, faint at first, a phantom rhythm drifted on the edge of sleep. Was it percussion or merely the echo of a dream? Footfalls, distinctly, undeniably, from above. But above lay only roof tiles and sky. My apartment crowned the building. No neighbors resided overhead. Old structures murmur, don't they? A mantra against rising unease. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the sound away. Yet it persisted. A measured tread, slow, deliberate, traversing the expanse directly over my ceiling, heel to toe, heel to toe. A cold vine twisted around my heart. Eyes snapping open, I stared into the oppressive dark above. This was no figment. Real weight, real steps, paced the void overhead. I pushed myself upright in bed, mind scrabbling for logic. An attic? None I'd been told of, none apparent. Still, the footfalls echoed, each step placed with an almost thoughtful precision, resonating through the plaster. Heart hammering against my ribs, I slipped from the sheets. Rationality scrambled for purchase on the sheer cliff face of impossibility. Perhaps a forgotten access point. Vermin grown impossibly large, standing in the chilled air, listening to that heavy, relentless pacing. Neither explanation felt remotely adequate. My phone's beam sliced through the gloom as I crept into the hallway, the light trembling in my grip. The steps continued, unhurried, directly above my path. Courage deserted me. My limbs felt like poured concrete. Confrontation seemed unthinkable. I simply stood, a prisoner of sound and shadow. Abruptly, silence fell. Utter, profound stillness. I held my breath, straining for the slightest noise, but the apartment returned to its inert quietude, as if the spectral promenade had never occurred. Overreacting, I chided myself. Half asleep, building groans, stress. Back in bed, sleep remained elusive, a skittish creature frightened off by the night's anomaly. Daylight brought a fragile sense of normalcy. Work consumed my thoughts, pushing the nocturnal strangeness to the periphery. Returning that evening, however, felt different. Crossing the threshold, an unfamiliar scent met me. Stale, cloying, the olfactory stain of decay. A quick survey of the kitchen yielded nothing amiss. No forgotten refuse accounted for it. The odor seemed to emanate impossibly from the ceiling itself. As dusk bled into night, the memory of the footsteps resurfaced, insistent. My gaze kept drifting upwards, anticipating, dreading. Yet the hours passed uneventfully. By the time I sought sleep, a sliver of doubt had returned. Perhaps it had all been a trick of an overtired mind. Around 2, they returned, louder this time, heavier, imbued with an undeniable presence. The same slow, deliberate pacing directly overhead. It felt less like movement, more like a statement. Gooseflesh prickled my arms. Phone clutched like a talisman. Indecision warred within me. The landlord? What absurdity could I possibly convey? Someone's walking in my ceiling. The police? For creaking floorboards or an errant squirrel? Before any choice could crystallize, the pacing halted precisely above my bed. A pause, thick with dread. Then, a sickening impact. A single, heavy thud, as if something substantial had been dropped onto the floorboards just beyond the plaster. It was followed immediately by a rasping, laborious friction, the sound of weight being dragged across a rough surface. My breath hitched. My pulse became a frantic drummer against my ears. Escape felt imperative, yet leaving the relative safety of the room, knowing that was just overhead, seemed equally perilous. I lay rigid, trapped by terror, listening as a dragging sound scraped on and on, eventually fading into that profound, unnerving silence once more. Sleep was unthinkable. I remained awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling, waiting. Morning found me dialing the landlord, Elias Thorne. I recounted the noises, the footsteps, the thud, asking, pleading, about any possible space above. Surprise, tinged with skepticism, colored his voice. No attic, no crawl space, nothing but roof joists, he assured me. Probably just the pipes settling, dear, he offered, the explanation sounding hollow even over the line. He promised a maintenance check, but his tone conveyed utter disbelief. Days melted into a week. The footsteps remained absent, yet the apartment felt occupied. A persistent awareness of being observed clung to the air, and the musty odor lingered, a subtle, pervasive signature of something hidden and unwell. Then, another night, another sound. Not footsteps. This was quieter, more insidious. A faint tapping, like fingernails gently drumming against the plaster directly above. It grew, rhythmic, insistent, impossible to ignore. Leaping from bed, phone light stabbing upwards, I scanned the ceiling. My breath caught. A hairline fracture, previously non-existent, snaked across the white expanse, originating from the locus of the tapping. I watched, mesmerized by horror, as the tapping continued and the fissure visibly widened, infinitesimal cracks branching outwards as if under pressure from the other side. The tapping ceased. The crack remained, a jagged wound on the ceiling skin. I didn't wait. Keys fumbled into my hand. I fled, leaving lights ablaze, the door unsecured. I drove, directionless at first, finally landing on the doorstep of my friend Maya, incoherent and trembling in the pre-dawn chill. The next day, my voice tight, I called Thorne again. The crack, I insisted. He had to send someone. Hours later, his call confirmed the impossible. The maintenance worker found nothing. No access, no hidden room, no space where anything could walk or tap or be dragged. Just rafters and insulation beneath the roof. I never crossed that threshold again. The lease was broken, the deposit sacrificed. Whatever presence resided in the unseen space above my ceiling, whatever paced and dropped and dragged and tapped its way through the plaster, its nature remained a chilling enigma. Some vacancies are best left unfilled. Some silences best left unbroken. This apartment, snagged for a rent that whispered suspiciously low for the neighborhood, presented itself as unremarkable, save for one architectural anomaly: a protracted corridor, sheathed floor to ceiling in reflective glass, an endless gallery of shelves. Walking its length that first time felt akin to navigating a carnival attraction, my own form replicated into infinity down the mirrored tunnel. A flicker of disquiet sparked, instantly rationalized as mere aesthetic eccentricity. The lease was signed. Acclimatization, I assured myself, would follow. Weeks dissolved into the rhythm of late shifts and exhaustion. The mirrored passage became just that, a passage traversed with scant attention, paid to the silent, multiplying audience accompanying my weary trek to bed. Occasionally, a peripheral flicker, a phantom movement mirroring my own, would trigger that primal jolt of misrecognition. My reflection, I'd conclude, simply caught unawares by my own tired eyes. A trick of the light, nothing more. Then came a night steeped in unusual cold, the building's fickle heating system offering little comfort. A chill clung to my skin as I shed my coat in the living area. Turning towards the bedroom, I confronted the corridor, its surfaces now veiled in an unexpected haze, not the transient bloom of warm breath meeting cold glass. I held mine, watching. Every panel simultaneously wore the same thin film of condensation. No steaming shower, no simmering pot, no damp air invited through an open window could account for it. I stood sentinel, scrutinizing the glass, seeking a logical source for the inexplicable fog. Within the mist, faint geometries began to emerge, not random smudges, but shapes possessing edges too deliberate. Stepping nearer, the lines resolved into intricate, almost runic patterns, yet clarity remained elusive. They shimmered at the edge of perception. A blink could erase one configuration, only for another to coalesce elsewhere upon reopening my eyes. Minutes stretched as I strained to capture a single pattern before it dissolved. A frantic pulse hammered against my ribs, sweat beading on my brow, despite the pervasive cold. A chilling paradox. My hand reached out, an instinct to wipe the pain clear with my sleeve. Fingertips met not smooth, cool glass, but a peculiar resistance, like pressing against a membrane of dense, unseen ice. It wasn't frozen, yet offered no easy glide. Applying more pressure, my nails scraped, an audible grating against something solid masquerading as simple condensation. Recoiling was instantaneous. My hand snatched back, pulse thundering. The urge to try again vanished. I retreated, backing towards my bedroom, the distinct sensation of unseen eyes following my every step. That night ushered in the first of the unsettling dreams. I navigated an oppressive fog, visibility reduced to mere inches, the air damp and frigid against my skin. The ground yielded like sodden concrete beneath my steps. Then, the shadows materialized, disembodied forearms, hands grasping blindly from the murk, reaching. Panic seized me as I tried to flee, limbs leaden, wading through invisible sludge. The spectral hands brushed my arms, my shoulders, closer and closer, until one clamped firmly around my wrist. I awoke with a strangled gasp, drenched, sheets twisted into ropes around me. Darkness still reigned. My chest ached from the violent rhythm of my heart, breaths ragged until calm slowly, painstakingly returned. Morning found the corridor pristine, the mirrors crystalline and impassive. Had the previous night's encounter, the fog, the patterns been merely the architecture of a nightmare? The thought offered fragile comfort, shattered as dusk bled through the windows. Checking again, I found the mist returned, blooming in erratic patches across the glass. New patterns flickered within, different yet sharing the same cryptic, looping aesthetic. A cold dread traced its path down my spine. I fought the rising panic, attempting rationalizations, temperature differentials, quirks of ventilation, but none could adequately explain the precision, the transience, the life in those shifting forms. An attempt to clean them proved futile. Glass cleaner and cloth met the surface only for the fabric to snag, catching on unseen roughness. Increased pressure elicited a cringe-inducing scratching, my hand trembling as if scraping ice from a winter windshield. Nausea coiled in my gut. My breathing grew shallow. Defeated, I lowered the cloth, unable to continue. In the ensuing nights, I cultivated an avoidance of the corridor. After dark, rushing passage with eyes fixed firmly on the floorboards, yet its presence was inescapable, a necessary conduit. Imagination, or perhaps something else, began to play tricks in my periphery. A glance sideways, catching my reflection turning a fraction too late, or its head angled forward when mine was already averted. Subtle, unnerving discrepancies suggesting not a reflection, but an imperfect mimicry. Each instance left my skin crawling. Sleep offered no refuge, the nightmares escalating. Always the fog, the disembodied hands, the sensation of being pulled into the grey void. I'd wake gasping, sometimes crying out, my throat raw by morning, eyes sunken. The thought of confiding in anyone felt ludicrous, embarrassing. How to articulate that the mirrors in my hallway seemed sentient, haunted? The landlord would surely dismiss it as delusion or faulty humidity control. 2 weeks into the siege, desperation spurred a new tactic. A small, handheld steamer, purchased from a local hardware store. The plan: confront the phenomenon directly, see if concentrated steam might clarify the patterns or reveal something more. Waiting until deep night, around 11, I extinguished all lights save for the living room's distant glow, painting the corridor entrance. The mirrors wore their familiar patchy shroud. My hand shook, plugging in the device, its low hum the only sound in the tense silence. Approaching the nearest panel, I aimed the nozzle. Steam billowed, layering onto the existing mist. Initially, nothing. Then, beneath the added vapor, tiny fissures spiderwebbed through the original fog, branching, moving under the surface. My heart slammed against my ribs. With a choked cry, I jerked the steamer back, stumbling, colliding with a small side table. It crashed, the lamp atop it shattering, plunging the corridor into absolute darkness. Scrabbling wildly for the wall switch, my fingers finally found purchase. Light flooded the space. The mirror looked ordinary again, merely damp from the steam. The moving lines were gone. Adrenaline surged, leaving me stiff-shouldered, teeth clenched. Moving out became an obsession, tempered by the harsh reality of a broken lease and a depleted savings account. Could I simply ignore it, pretend normalcy, by shunning the corridor after sunset? The dreams persisted, mocking the notion, and daily passage remained unavoidable. 2 nights passed, seeking respite. I arranged myself to sleep on the living room sofa. Around 2 a.m., a faint sound pulled me from shallow slumber, a low, abrasive scraping emanating from the hallway. My body went rigid, skin turning clammy. Sitting up, I peered towards the corridor's dark maw, the distant streetlights casting a faint, oily sheen on the glass surfaces. My pulse hammered in my ears, Compelled despite my fear, I rose, creeping to the threshold. The scraping ceased. I looked into the nearest mirror, saw my own silhouette against the dimness, and there, near the center of the right-hand panel, a nebulous patch of fog swirled, coalescing into familiar lines. I leaned closer, intent on the pattern, when a chilling detail arrested me. My reflection's head turned, facing me directly. Before I had moved, I froze, breath trapped in my throat. Then, its hand, the reflection's hand, lifted, pressing palm first against the glass. My own arms hung limp at my sides. A wave of pure terror washed over me. Stumbling backward, I slammed the living room light switch. Brightness assaulted the corridor. Instantly, my reflection snapped into perfect synchronicity, mimicking my posture exactly. The fog patch remained, its pattern now indistinct. My heart threatened to break free of my ribs. My own ragged breathing filled the sudden silence. My legs felt unstable, threatening to buckle. Yesterday was lost. I didn't go to work, too profoundly shaken. I sat numbly in the living room, mind racing for solutions. Covering the mirrors, sheets, newspaper, anything, seemed the only recourse, but the sheer scale of the corridor, the height of the glass, felt insurmountable alone. Still, I tried. Duct tape and an old bedsheet in hand, I managed to obscure perhaps 2 panels before an intense awareness prickled the back of my neck, the feeling of a tangible presence. I spun around. Empty corridor. Infinite reflections. Just me and my frayed nerves. Chest tight, fingers trembling. I abandoned the effort, retreating once more to the relative sanctuary of the living room. Here I remain. It's late, sleep an impossibility. Fear is a physical weight. My gaze drifts constantly to the corridor entrance. Even with the lights blazing, the mirrors possess an unnatural luminescence, like surfaces filmed with frost. My mouth is desert dry, hands cold. Every creak of the building, every distant mechanical sigh sends a jolt through me. Fleeing feels like the only sane option, yet financially, it's untenable. I'm tethered here. Breaking the mirrors crosses my mind. A violent, cathartic act. But the potential cost, both monetary and perhaps metaphysical, is terrifying. What might shattering them unleash? The thought sickens me. For now, vigilance is my only strategy. Watching the corridor from this distance, my head aches, food holds no appeal, my nerves are shredded wires. The image of my reflection acting independently, its hand pressed to the glass, is seared into my memory. Powerlessness is a suffocating shroud. The simple act of walking to my bedroom now feels like a gauntlet run, triggering palpitations and hyperventilation. Will it escalate, or simply repeat night after night? I dread finding out, yet choices are scarce. This apartment, this prison of glass, is all I have. My next desperate thought, barricade the corridor entirely, furniture stacked high, anything to block the view, to seal it off. I crave oblivion from those surfaces. I wish I could dismiss this as stress, as hallucination, but the tactile resistance of the glass, the fleeting sigils in the mist, the autonomous movement of my own mirrored image, these experiences are undeniable, visceral. I can only hope to endure this night without succumbing to the nightmares, without the mirrors beckoning me closer. That's the extent of my current ambition. Stay calm, keep the lights burning, avert my gaze from any reflective surface, wait for morning, for the temporary illusion of safety that daylight brings. But night inevitably returns, and I feel with chilling certainty the mirrors are not yet finished. Two months swallowed by the maw of this archaic edifice, and the premonition began with the lift. Its antiquity wasn't charming. It was suspect. Bronzed doors groaned shut with a discordant clang. The single overhead bulb spasmed fitfully, and the mirrored panels lining the cage were scabbed with scratches, hazed not by simple grime, but by the tarnish of years, possessing a murky, obsidian gleam that disquieted the soul. Each nocturnal ascent brought a peculiar stillness, a vacuum where the air seemed to pause, holding its breath. Within that hush, reflected in the tarnished glass, a peripheral smudge began to coalesce, an outline adjacent to my own weary form, yet distinctly other. A silhouette that refused geometry, dissolving the instant the doors sighed open onto my floor. Optical fatigue, I insisted. Stress manifesting as phantoms. My existence orbits the late shift. Midnight, often later, finds me summoning the lift from the sepulchral lobby. The aged indicator stuttered its descent. Inside, the familiar chorus, the groan of stressed cables, the electric hum of the failing light. Exhaustion pinned me to the rear wall. Typically, near the fourth landing, the spectral companion materialized in the glass, a vague darkness. With each floor gained, it seemed to migrate, an inch closer, then another. By the seventh, a phantom proximity, an unnerving sense of something brushing my sleeve. Then, freedom on my floor, and the reflection cleared. Who would believe such a tale? Laughter felt certain. Without proof, it remained a figment, a specter born of pressure. The relentless deadlines, the screen-scorched eyes, the skull-splitting fatigue. Hallucinations seemed plausible. Afterimages burned onto tired retinas. Yet some nights, the presence thickened, acquiring a subtle weight. A localized frost crept along my left flank. The fine hairs on my arms lifted, prickling goose flesh despite the sealed confines of the box. An inexplicable cold. Pressing the call button became an act laced with trepidation. The 12 flights of stairs beckoned, a daunting penance after a draining day, yet perhaps preferable. No, the lift remained the necessary evil. I attempted aversion, fixing my gaze on the scuffed floor, the illuminated numbers, but denial amplified the unease. A flicker in the periphery, a perceived shift in the mirrored gloom. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, breath catching high in my chest. It was nearing 2 one morning, the building submerged in slumber, the lobby desolate. The summons echoed faintly as the cabin descended. The doors parted, releasing a breath of cold, stagnant air, a scent of rust and damp decay. 12th floor selected. The doors sealed, the light convulsed twice, and we began our ascent. Eyes downcast, yet the prickling certainty of something behind me tightened my scalp, knotted my stomach. Around the 4th floor, the familiar chill bloomed to my left. A reluctant glance at the mirror confirmed it. Beside my own hunched reflection, the nebulous form hovered, impossibly close. A dry swallow. 6th floor. It drifted nearer still. Breath held captive, palms slick. 7th. A distinct pressure, an unseen weight against my side. My spine stiffened, nape hairs bristling. Then a violent lurch, an abrupt halt. The indicator glowed. 8. A floor unbidden. The doors remained sealed. The light above began a frantic, epileptic dance. In the strobing light, my reflection fractured, face blanching. My gaze locked onto the adjacent shape in the glass. No longer mere silhouette, it resolved. Shoulders slumped within frayed fabric, arms hanging limply, a head crowned with disheveled hair. A man, clad in a ruined suit, the lapels torn, the tie a tattered remnant. His pallor was deathly, eyes sunk in shadowed hollows, yet fixed on mine. A chilling half-smile played on his lips, constricting my throat. My fingers fumbled, stabbing the door-open panel. Inert, again, futile. The doors were resolute, the light's spasms intensified. With each flicker, the mirror image shifted. Now him, now me, now him again. He stared out from the glass, that unnerving smile unwavering. I lunged for the emergency call. A muffled, pathetic chime answered, swallowed by the growing cold. Floor buttons remained dead. A glance back at the mirror. He occupied my space now. My own reflection erased. Only him, smiling that static, unblinking smile. My hands trembled violently. Sweat beaded on my brow. Another flicker, and he was gone, my own frightened face staring back. Then, like a faulty projection, he reappeared, directly behind me, in the glass. His reflected grin seemed to graze my ear, yet the air behind me remained empty. I spun around, nothing, but the mirror held his image, impossibly close, peering over my shoulder. A glacial touch bloomed between my shoulder blades, sharp as splintered ice. A scream lodged itself in my throat, silent. The light buzzed, dipped to near darkness, then flared. His mirrored eyes locked onto mine. Slowly, deliberately, his reflection raised a hand, settling it onto my reflected shoulder. Simultaneously, an intense, chilling pressure clamped down on my actual flesh. I recoiled, slamming against the opposite wall, heart detonating in my chest, air refusing to enter my lungs. I hammered the walls, beat upon the sealed doors, shouted into the void. Silence answered, palms slick again. The floor indicator, dark, trapped, suspended between floors, in this pulsing cage. Again, the emergency bell unanswered. The intercom yielded only a hiss of static, punctuated by faint, faraway clicks. Is anyone there? My whisper dissolved. From behind me, yet seemingly from within the very walls, arose a low, suffocated laughter. My skin crawled. I spun. Emptiness. But the mirror held him, his face now nearer, eyes like burnt-out sockets, lips pulled back, from unremarkable teeth in something closer to a snarl. The laughter echoed, though his reflected mouth remained still, a disembodied mockery. I backed away, colliding with the rear panel. The space felt impossibly small. Could I force the doors? My fingers scrabbled for purchase in the seam, straining until my muscles screamed. Immovable metal, breath shallow, panic rising. Back to the mirror. His expression shifted again, mouth slightly agape, lips dry and cracked. My legs were water. More futile pounding on the door. Escape. Air. Light. Anything but this. Another flicker. He vanished. My own ragged reflection returned. I swiped at my shoulder. Only sweat-damp fabric met my touch. My neck ached. A ringing filled my ears. Then the laughter again, closer, more intimate. The lift shuddered violently, a groan traveling down the cables. I stumbled, catching myself, and the reflection shifted. He returned, regarding me with unnerving placidity, as if waiting. Panic surged. I slammed my hand across the control panel, striking every button. A tortured mechanical whine, a jolt, and incredibly, we ascended. A crawl, agonizingly slow. The light steadied, albeit dimmer. For a moment, the mirror was clear. Then, passing 9, the shape reformed, fainter now, retreated to the back wall of the reflection, head canted curiously. I fought to ignore it, icy tendrils tracing my spine, eyes glued to the illuminated numbers. 10, 11. My pulse roared as 12 approached. Please, open. With a final jarring thud, we stopped. The doors slid apart. I practically fell into the corridor, stumbling on the worn carpet. A backward glance. Inside the lift, the mirror reflected the empty cabin, devoid even of my own image now that I stood outside it. The presence had dissolved. I gasped for air, like a drowning man surfaced. The hallway blessedly mundane, the lighting normal, the air almost warm. I waited, heart hammering, expecting the doors to close. They hung open, the light within giving one last weak flicker. I edged forward, then recoiled, a wave of nausea washing over me. The laughter was gone. Slowly, silently, the bronze doors slid shut, and I heard the machinery whine as the lift began its descent. I lingered in the hallway, forcing calm onto ragged nerves before finally retreating to my apartment. Double-locked the door, dropped my satchel. My shirt clung, drenched. Hands shook so badly, the key fumbled in the lock. In the bathroom, cold water on my face. My reflection was a stranger, haggard, haunted, but blessedly alone. Deep breaths, slow the racing pulse. Changed clothes, collapsed onto the sofa, staring sightlessly at the ceiling, straining for any sound beyond the building's normal nocturnal size. Silence. Whom could I tell? Maintenance. A friend. The words felt ludicrous. A ghost in the lift mirror touched me. The pressure on my shoulder, the invasive cold, those sensations were undeniable. Tomorrow, the stairs. That metal coffin held too much dread. Sleep offered little refuge, fractured by dreams of silent landings and corridors stretching into infinity. I startled awake repeatedly, drenched in sweat, certain I'd heard that choked laughter drifting from the corners of my room, only the echo of fear. The following morning, I descended the stairwell, arriving breathless but grounded on the lobby floor. Safety. For a week, I shunned the lift, embracing the 12-flight climb upon my return each evening, exhausting, unsustainable, yet necessary. Then a notice appeared. The lift undergoing inspection for electrical irregularities. Hallway whispers mentioned it stalling on the 8th floor, attributed to a convenient power fluctuation. I volunteered nothing of the spectral passenger, the phantom touch. Explanations felt impossible, sanity too easily questioned, but the memory remains indelible. The hollow-eyed stare from the glass, the icy weight upon my shoulder. Even now, with the lift declared operational, I favor the stairs, especially after dark. The fear persists that stepping into that cramped space again will conjure the shape from the tarnished mirror, that I'll feel the chill deepen with each ascending floor, and hear, once more, that soft, insidious laughter just before the doors lock me inside. The wind shrieked through the pines, a raw sound that consumed the frantic rhythm of my own lungs laboring. I plunged onward, deeper into the umbral woods, legs screaming protest, breath scorching my throat. Rain and sweat mingled, plastering strands of hair across my brow like sodden weeds. To halt was unthinkable. To glance back, an invitation to the terror I knew stalked the shadowed path behind me. The man from the cabin, Silas, and the cold gleam I'd seen in his hand. It began innocently, conceived in the sterile glow of monitors and the quiet hum of servers. I'm Leo, a digital architect from Seattle, 28 years entombed in code. Months walled up in my apartment had left me starved for something primal, something real. The cascades, those jagged teeth biting the skyline, promised catharsis. A 3-day solo pilgrimage, pack-laden, spirit yearning for the vast, untamed silence. The first day unfolded like a forgotten dream. Air sharp as quartz, vistas that stole the breath and offered peace in return, a quietude unknown in the city's cacophony. But as the second day bled into evening, the heavens curdled. Clouds the color of bruises massed overhead, unleashing a cold, persistent deluge. Shelter became imperative. And then, nestled improbably in a clearing, I saw it. A cabin, compact and sturdy, a fragile thread of smoke aspiring from its chimney. Gratitude surged, a warm tide against the chill. I rapped on the seasoned timber of the door, rehearsing a plea for refuge. It swung inward, revealing a man whose face seemed carved from the mountain itself. Late 50s, perhaps, weathered deep, beard a salt and pepper thicket, eyes the startling blue of deep ice, unsettlingly direct. Adrift? His voice was gravel, rough-edged, but lacking immediate menace. I stammered my predicament, gesturing towards the intensifying squall. He considered me a moment, then, to my profound relief, stepped back. Silas, he offered, a simple declaration as I crossed the threshold into the cabin's dim, fire-warmed heart. Got stew on, if you've the hunger. Introducing myself, I offered thanks that felt inadequate. The space was compact, rustic, radiating a lived-in warmth, thick with the savory promise of the bubbling pot. Yet, my gaze snagged on the walls. Trophies, yes. The expected antlers, a formidable bear hide, but also an unsettling collection of large knives, displayed with a kind of reverence. We ate with few words exchanged, the stew a welcome heat against the storm's chill. Silas deflected conversational gambits with monosyllables or low grunts. Still, the roof overhead and the food within were blessings I couldn't discount. Outside, the wind escalated its assault, howling like a famished wolf. Silas gestured towards a worn couch. Sleep, he offered. Exhaustion, potent and insistent despite the unfamiliar pulse of the storm and the quiet tension in the small room, swiftly claimed me. What fractured the depths of sleep? A sound misheard? Or merely the primal whisper of instinct, sensing wrongness? My eyes flickered open. Darkness clung to the cabin corners, the fire reduced to a nest of winking embers. Then I saw him, a silhouette against the faint glow. Silas, standing over me, simply watching, and clutched in his hand, catching a dying ember's light, was the unmistakable profile of one of the hunting knives from the wall. Ice flooded my veins. Shouldn't have come, he murmured, the words barely disturbing the air, yet heavy as stones. None of them should. Sleep evaporated. Adrenaline detonated within me, sharp and cold. Whoa, what? What do you mean? My voice, a thin, reedy thing, betrayed my terror. Silas's eyes, reflecting the ember's faint pulse, seemed lit from within by a chilling fervor. This forest, it answers to me. Years, it has. But your kind keeps coming, trespassing, upsetting the quiet. He shifted, a subtle movement that brought the knife's edge into sharper relief. Tried warnings, whispers on the wind, signs left unseen. They don't heed. Had to persuade them more firmly. The unspoken horror crashed down, stark and absolute. The trophies, not all were animal, and I was marked as the next addition to his collection. What followed was pure, unthinking reaction, a maelstrom of terror and instinct. I lashed out with my foot, connecting sharply with Silas's knee. He grunted, stumbling backward, a crucial instant's grace. I scrambled off the couch, a desperate lunge towards the door. Behind me, a roar of fury erupted as my fingers, numb and clumsy with fear, wrestled the latch. Then I burst free into the storm's violent embrace, the icy rain a brutal shock. Blindly, I fled into the churning forest, branches whipping my face like scourges, unseen roots conspiring to send me sprawling. I could hear Silas behind me, crashing through the undergrowth, his shouted threats torn and distorted by the gale. And so I ran, propelled by primal fear, deeper into the black, trackless woods, directionless, aimless, save for the desperate need for distance. Time dissolved. Minutes or hours merged into one continuous nightmare. Every shadow writhed with imagined threats. Every snap of a twig heralded Silas's imminent arrival. Rain had seeped through every layer, leaving me shuddering, bones aching with cold. Just as exhaustion threatened final surrender, as my legs turned to leaden weights ready to buckle, a glimmer pierced the oppressive dark. Faint, distant, but undeniably light. Hope, fierce and unexpected, surged, lending phantom strength to my limbs. I pressed onward, praying it wasn't some cruel mirage, born of desperation and fatigue. Closer, closer. Recognition dawned. A ranger station. I practically collapsed against the door, hammering on it with the last vestiges of my strength. Help! The sound scraped raw from my throat. Please, help me. The door swung open. I tumbled into the arms of a startled ranger, the world tilting precariously. Through chattering teeth, the story spilled out. The storm, the cabin, Silas, the knife, the terrible revelation. The ranger's expression hardened as he listened, swiftly pulling me inside. The solid thud of the bolt, locking behind us a sound of profound security. Activity erupted, a whirlwind of uniforms, radios crackling. More rangers materialized, state police. They took my fragmented account, wrapped me in dry blankets, pressed hot coffee into my trembling hands. A search party was mobilized. I sat numbly, adrift in the aftermath, the monstrous reality of the night slowly solidifying around me. Dawn painted the sky in bruised hues when the news arrived via radio static. They'd located the cabin. Silas had vanished. But what they discovered beneath the floorboards confirmed the unspeakable truth I'd glimpsed. Hidden chambers, grotesque evidence of Silas's long harvest. Hikers, campers, souls swallowed by the wilderness, their disappearances attributed to accident or exposure. His grim reign, spanning over 2 decades of phantom existence in these woods, preying on the unwary, had finally been exposed by my desperate flight. But the predator himself remained uncaught. The subsequent days, weeks, were a landscape of shadows. Nightmares clawed me back to the forest floor. Every sudden noise was a jolt of remembered terror. Therapy offered fragile anchors, friends and family, their concerned faces blurred by my own internal fog. The forest, once a sanctuary, now loomed as a place of profound dread, its beauty irrevocably poisoned. 2 years have passed. Seattle is behind me, the beckoning mountains now symbols of a terror I cannot unlearn. I bury myself in the logic of code, the predictable flow of algorithms offering a semblance of control. Yet, sometimes, when the night deepens and the wind sighs outside my window, I hear it howl through phantom pines, feel the spectral lash of branches against my skin, the frantic pounding of my heart echoing the desperate rhythm of that flight. Silas was never found, an open case file gathering dust. Does he still roam those vast, indifferent wilds, a ghost in the green depths, waiting? The thought remains a shard of ice lodged near my heart. I manage the fear, mostly, pushing it down beneath the surface of daily life. But the memory of the cabin, the chase through the storm-lashed darkness, that remains indelible. A stark reminder of the thin veil between sanctuary and savagery, how swiftly adventure's promise can curdle into unimaginable peril. So, should you find yourself wandering the Cascades, deep in the wilderness, and stumble upon a lone cabin, smoke curling invitingly from its chimney, keep moving. Regardless of the storm, regardless of your weariness, do not stop. You cannot know what or who waits within, knife gleaming, ready to claim another trophy for the collection.